Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today for this Ax-1 post-Splashdown teleconference. I'm Irene Claus with Axiom Space, and we're so delightful that you can join us. So after launching on April 8th and spending 17 days in low Earth orbit on the International Space Station, the AX crew members of Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, pilot Larry Connor, and mission specialists Eitan Sibe and Mark Pathy safely splashed down their return to Earth earlier today, 1:06 p.m. Eastern Time off the coast of Florida. Today's splashdown officially concludes this historic Ax-1 mission, the first all-private mission to the International Space Station, and successfully demonstrates Axiom Space's ability to integrate with the ISS and conduct meaningful research. Today, you're going to hear from Benji Reed, Senior Director of Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX, and Axiom's own Derek Hassman, the Operations Director. In a moment, we will take questions from reporters. Please press *1 if you want to ask a question. But we'll begin first with opening remarks, and we'll start with Derek. Derek,
thank you. Thank you, Bettina, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for participating today. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here at the conclusion of the first private mission to the International Space Station, which is truly a historic event for a number of reasons. And I'll spend some time talking about what our Axiom 1 crew accomplished. But first, I just wanted to report that the crew is doing very well, is in great spirits. We had 2 Axiom flight surgeons on the SpaceX recovery vessel in the Atlantic, and they greeted the crew as they egressed the Dragon capsule and did a quick medical evaluation. Everybody looks great and is feeling reasonably well. They are currently en route from that recovery ship to a Jacksonville airport by helicopter, and then at the Jacksonville airport, they will then be picked up by plane and fly to Orlando. Well, they'll continue post-flight medical and data collection. After that, they're going to get a well-deserved night of rest and then spend a couple more days in Orlando before headed back to Houston. As folks who have been following the mission know, we had a very ambitious suite of activities planned for this crew. The mission was very research-focused with partners throughout the U.S. and across the world. And I have to say that our Ax-1 crew performed well above expectations. The mission was planned for 10 days, but because of weather, the crew enjoyed a bonus week in space, which they certainly enjoyed. So 17 days total and 15 days docked to the ISS. In terms of accomplishments, the Ax-1 crew supported 26 science payloads and technology demos that have been curated with academic research partners around the globe. And the Axiom astronauts themselves actually served as research subjects. So there was data collected pre-flight to get a baseline, and then in the next couple of days, data will be collected again in order to understand the impact that the microgravity environment had on their bodies. The Ax-1 crew also shared the excitement of their mission by performing over 30 outreach events, both science, technology, engineering, art, and math, with participants across the globe. And those outreach efforts were conducted in multiple languages, including English, Hebrew, Spanish, French, and Arabic. And as exciting as it is to have completed this historic mission, we're going to now start looking forward to additional missions. Axiom plans to fly multiple private astronaut missions to the International Space Station over the next several years, with the next mission, of course, being Ax-2 that is planned for early springtime next year. The partnerships that enabled the accomplishment of this mission were amazing, and I'd like to just reference those partners now. Of course, you'll hear from Benji shortly from SpaceX, but both SpaceX and NASA have been just amazing partners and collaborators throughout this experience. From a SpaceX perspective, of course, they provided the ride to and from the ISS, and their Falcon launch vehicle and their Dragon spacecraft performed flawlessly throughout. I was lucky enough to be in Florida for the launch, which was a beautiful thing. And then of course, the Splashdown today. So many, many thanks go to SpaceX for the critical contributions that they made. And it wasn't just the hardware. They also trained the crew in the operation of the Dragon in the 2 years leading up to launch. And then for NASA, of course, for providing the amazing destination, the International Space Station, and also training as well for NASA. The Ax-1 crew trained at Johnson Space Center on all the systems and other activities that they're going to perform on ISS. So without those two partners, of course, none of this would be possible. So just an amazing first step that's leading up to our the launch and activation of the Axiom station, with the first module being planned for 2024. So I would say overall, this has been just an amazing success. The crew performed beyond expectations. The ground teams were tremendous. Looking forward to seeing the crew tomorrow and getting feedback on their experience, and then starting to work toward Ax2 and subsequent missions. And Bettina, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Derek. Now we'll hear from Benji Reed, Senior Director of Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX. Benji?
Great. Thank you, Bettina. Thank you, Derek. Today, we welcomed our Dragon back with Axiom Space's first 4 private astronauts, Michael, Larry, Eitan, and Mark. It was a great day, a beautiful day out there for a return. We had the astronauts, as Derek had mentioned, they got a little bit extra time on station. We had a daily wind effect that was causing a pattern of high winds that affected all of our various potential landing sites. What that ended up doing was just, giving them a few extra days on station. As always, safety is our priority. And whether it's launching crew and Dragon or bringing Dragon with the crew home safely, we pay close attention to that, and weather is one of those driving factors to make sure we're ready to bring them home. So that was kind of the campaign to get us here today. They'd been up there for about 16 days, docked to ISS, and everything performed nominally. Dragon undocked autonomously and performed the departure burns that it needed to do, and the various phasing that it needed to do to come home. And as I mentioned, everything was nominal, including the reentry, our loss of signal, acquisition of signal that we always see during reentry, and then of course the deployment of both the drogues and the mains for the parachute system, and then splashdown. Derek mentioned the crew is in good spirits, and they were great, having a good time talking with each other and talking with our core, the operator who talks to the crew when they're on orbit, and seem to have really enjoyed their trip. It's a real honor. I've mentioned this many times, and I think it's always worth saying, to be able to fly crews for our customers like Axiom, especially when they're doing these great, important things to expand humanity in space, which of course is our core mission. And the real honor is to bring those folks back home to their family and friends. We're going to continue to hold that kind of diligence as we move forward. We've got our Crew 4 launch coming up for NASA this week, and then shortly after that, after they do their handover, we'll bring the Crew 3 team home. I just want to take another moment to thank Axiom for trusting us, for thanking the crew of Axiom for trusting us and their families, and for the great partnership that we have with Axiom, with NASA, with the 45th Space Wing, and everybody else that makes this possible. Before I end, I'll throw out a few fun facts that I think are pretty cool. This is our first splashdown in Jacksonville, and we now have bingo on all of our splashdown sites. We've landed at all 7 of our identified and approved splashdown sites. So of our 7 crewed missions or Crew Dragon missions, we have landed all 7 sites now. This is the first third flight of a crew capsule. That's pretty cool. There's also our first direct-to-zenith docking. And this is the same capsule that Bob and Doug used, as everybody's well aware. And this Dragon now has spent over 260 days in space with this mission. So it's pretty great. Anyway, thank you again, and I'll hand it back over to you, Bettina.
Thank you so much, Benji. Found it kind of appropriate that it's the same capsule of DM1 and this, both part of such a historic moment in human spaceflight as we try to open up the aperture to get more people in space. So what a great moment. With that, we'll open it up to questions from our reporters. Again, if you have a question, please press *1. Our first question will come from Jeff Faust from Space News.
Good afternoon, Jeff Faust of Space News. Congratulations on the successful splashdown. For Benji, you've got about 36 hours until the scheduled Crew 4 launch. What are you going to be looking at from this splashdown in order to support the Crew 4 launch? And also, it looked like on this splashdown, all 4 parachutes opened at the same time. I'm curious if there's anything different this time around that might have caused that performance versus the slightly lagging parachutes you'd seen on a couple of previous splashdowns. Thanks.
Hi, Jeff. Great questions. You know, really, we're not going to do anything different than we always do, which is very diligently analyzing all the data. So while we're already on orbit, from pre-launch through docking and then through the mission, our teams are looking closely at all the data, including Dragon's health and performance. They're already analyzing the data and assessing it as we're coming home and even through the splashdown. We have a lot of automated systems as well. They're assessing the data and providing results. But our REs, our responsible engineers that own the various systems and components, they're looking closely at the data. And we'll do that process that they do normally. We'll have our launch readiness review later tonight, and we'll be ready to present any concerns or issues, or most likely, how everything's looking great for our launch for Crew 4. And it's the same process we did for Axiom when we were getting ready to fly them, and we'll, and in between missions, we'll do the same thing here. And then at the same time, NASA is a tight partnership, just like they have been for this Axiom mission and for all of our missions. And we work closely with their engineering team to make sure that they all have data, and they've been getting the data, getting the same access and that sort of thing. So they also can do their reviews and their concurrence for readiness for Wednesday. In terms of the parachutes, I think it's really important to kind of maybe reframe that question and kind of reframe the whole topic in everybody's mind. The reality is that in a 4-chute system like we have, you will often have a slightly different timing in how all of the different parachutes open. It's actually true in any parachute system. And the great thing about Crew Dragon's 4-chute system is it actually allows us to have kind of a chute out capability. It gives us redundancy in the chutes. But what you do see is it just gives you a little bit of a potentially greater spread in the timing to inflate those chutes. And so sometimes that's noticeable on the video or what you can see. Sometimes it's not noticeable to the human eye, but it's not like, in the real world, those chutes all are just perfectly inflating normally. That's the exact same, milliseconds. That's not what you'd expect. Sometimes you just can see a little bit of that inflation time differently. And all of in the past, everything has been nominal, and this was also a great nominal parachute performance.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and for that question. We will move on to our next reporter. I believe it's Irene Claus with Aviation Week. Irene?
Thanks, Bettina. For Benji, with the weather issues that kept the crew on the station longer, and with things getting even busier on station once Starliner is flying, is there any ideas about expanding the locations for Splashdown, looking beyond Florida? So there may be some other options in the future. And for Derek, can you specifically tell us some of the things that the crew did beyond their nominal science programs during those extra days on station? Were they able to do anything to help out station crew, like inventorying or anything like that? Thanks.
Sure. Having increasing opportunities both for launch and return is always very important, right? It allows constant access to space, and it also helps with safety to ensure that we're choosing timing and locations that maximize safety for the crew. In this case, we had in the very beginning, a number of years ago, we had thought, well, a few or just a handful of sites would be good, and that, going in with NASA, that's what we had all thought. Then as we decided as we got, moving into this program to expand that. And with the 7 sites, we actually have a really good coverage. They're split on different sides of Florida on the coast, and they really allow for a lot of different weather. In fact, today's landing with Jacksonville is often a site that doesn't have as good weather, but in this case, the weather patterns worked out great so that it was actually the better option. And so I think we've got a really good spread right now, a lot of really good sites. And so I think that'll continue where we are now. If we can see different ways, as I mentioned, to increase more opportunities, again, whether it's launches or returns, that's always a great thing for spaceflight and for safety. But for now, I think these 7 sites look really good.
And Irene, relative to what the crew was able to accomplish, I don't have the specific experiments, but I know that there was a handful of experiment runs that had to be deferred early on just because of the pace of the timeline that the crew was able to go back and complete. We were able to schedule additional outreach events that didn't fit into the nominal timeline. And just I know the crew, our Ax-1 crew pitched in on the general care and feeding and upkeep of ISS.
Well, thank you, Irene. We'll go to the next question. Marcia Dunn with Associated Press.
For you, Benji, I know you mentioned the importance of maintaining diligence as you move forward to Crew 4, but from an exhilaration point of view, from an accomplishment point of view, how exciting is it to be able to bring one crew down 1.5 days later, launch another, bring another crew down? I mean, is this the stuff of science fiction now that you're finally realizing, and how does it work into your big picture for the company? Thanks.
Great question. It is awesome. It's so cool to think that it was just a couple of years ago that we launched Bob and Doug, and now here on the same Dragon, we've launched the first all-commercial mission to space station. I mean, that was the goal, right? The goal was to provide NASA multiple providers and those providers, for those providers, NASA would be one customer out of many, and here we are. And then the next part of that big vision was, let's open up space, right, to everybody, and starting with commercial opportunities and opening up commercial LEO on a human spaceflight level, and here we are. It's just been a couple of years. On a personal level, I have to say, and I think we all probably have this experience of COVID time. And I always remind myself to add a couple of years to what I remember, or that sort of thing. But this is amazing to me that it really has only just been a couple of years since we got that first one off the ground. Of course, there was a lot of years in the making to get us here. For getting Crew Dragon and the Falcon 9 certified and prepared for flight, working with NASA to get ready to fly, and then for Axiom, all of the work that they've done to build up their business model and their case for how they can expand commercially into LEO. It's awesome. It's really, really cool.
Thank you, Marcia. Our next question comes from Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First for Derek, if I could. I know beyond AX2, Axiom is looking at flying crews of 4, non-professional astronauts. AX2 has Peggy Whitson as commander. Can you update us on your plans for that beyond AX2? Will AX3 have a crew of 4 revenue or paying passengers on board, so to speak, beginning with AX3? And for Benji, I know some design choices earlier in the Dragon program lowered the number of seats from 7 to 4. Given the demand that you're seeing, is there any way or any discussion of expanding the number of seats inside Dragon, or will the fleet that you have remain all with 4 seats? Thanks.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Benji. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Derek, I apologize. I stepped on you for the first part of the question. Why don't you answer yours first, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. Yeah, Stephen, relative to the plan for private astronaut missions going forward and the commander, I'll say that Axiom's goal is to schedule and execute 2 a year. So basically on 6-month centers, but that of course depends on the ISS traffic schedule and their flight plan, and each one of these flights needs to be carefully analyzed, and we work with NASA to find a spot that makes sense. And as was mentioned previously, there's going to be additional providers, and the traffic model just gets more complicated. So 2 a month is our goal. Not 2 a month, 2 a year is our goal, and we'll work with NASA going forward on that. And I'll say we haven't made decisions post AX2. AX2 is the only mission we have an agreement in principle with NASA on, and then we're working on the mission order for. And as you mentioned, that includes Peggy Whitson. And I think what we're going to do is look at how this mission went, go through all the lessons learned relative to training and performance on orbit and so forth, and then also gather data from AX2 as well, and then decide what's in the best interest of the program. Axiom would certainly like to get to a point where we fly an all-private crew, if you will, without an ex-NASA commander, but that's something in the future that we're going to work and collaborate with NASA on.
And in terms of Dragon seating, the current Crew Dragon that we have is pretty awesome, and I think that it's a good configuration. Certainly, it's a configuration that we have certified with NASA, and it's working well for all of our customers right now. I think the future is to look at Starship too, right? That is a great place to look at. Can we start to seat a lot of people? And that's the answer is yes. So I think as we expand into different kinds of missions and want to add a lot of seating, then definitely Starship's the place where that is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll go now to Chris Davenport with the Washington Post.
Hi, many thanks for doing this. For Benji, and I realize this might be a little bit down in the weeds, but I was wondering, how were you able to turn off that bilge pump so quickly? It just made me wonder if everything on the spacecraft is automated or can be controlled remotely. I mean, even a bilge pump. And then for Derek, just real quick on the timeline for AX2, I think you said it wouldn't come until early next spring. Is that right? And also any updates of when you might announce the other crew members? Thanks.
Derek, did you want to go first for that one? I think that's more important.
Relative to the announcement of the crew members, I believe that you will hear something relatively soon, probably in the next few weeks. And you're right on the timing. Again, we need to work with NASA and find the right spot on their flight plan where we fit. Axiom's goal is to fly early next year, about a year from now, but that's all dependent on port availability and the ISS traffic. So that's something we're going to work with NASA on the details of.
And then in terms of the bilge pump, it is a great question, Chris, but it's a little bit the weeds. You're right, but it's a great one. The reality is that on Dragon we have, first of all, the ability to assess performance and assess real-time behavior across the vehicle, the systems and the components, right? So we're getting all kinds of data and telemetry all the time, and then generally we want to be able to have control over as much of the system as we can. It allows for a lot of workarounds or just setting up if you need to do something according to the normal contingency plans or just backup plans. So it's really important to have that kind of constant telemetry on the vehicle and that kind of constant control. And a note on the bilge pump specifically, I think it's again something that's important to frame correctly. That's not necessary for crew safety, and it's not part of the nominal mission success, right? Really, those pumps that you hear about on the nets are just basically to help pump out any excess water if it even comes in, not into the crew capsule at all, but into the exterior where outside of the pressure vessel. And if there's any water intrusion at all when you splash down, then you want to be able to pump it out, because what that really does is just helps with refurbishment later. It helps with getting that Dragon turned around. We rarely see very much water at all, and if we do, we have those bilge pumps in place. And it's really important to also note that those pumps are not necessary for uprighting the vehicle or keeping the crew safe if there were water incursion. So, but that's a good question.
Thank you. Next, Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
And congratulations on the successful splashdown. Question for Benji. Because this was a private mission, NASA said that 30 minutes after undocking, sort of was in the hands of SpaceX and Axiom. Did you try any novel trajectories or take other actions during the return that you probably would not have done on a NASA mission? Thank you.
No, we look at our whole toolbox, everything that we've got in terms of all of our potential trajectories and the knobs you can turn to work out. Again, this goes kind of back to that earlier question about opportunities, right? You want to maximize the opportunities for launch or return, and so we always look at our toolbox and we look at, well, are there different things that we can do to expand that envelope of capability and add novel trajectories or not? But we're not doing things. We're not running it in a way that's different than we would with any human mission, right? Human spaceflight is human spaceflight. Doesn't matter who the customer is, and we work to make sure it's safe with everybody. And so this was a good, great normal trajectory that we would use and plan to, and we'll continue to always look at how we can expand opportunities in the future.
Great. Our next question comes from ASP, Isam Ahmed.
So, Derek, just a financial question. Just given the extra time that the astronauts were on board, is there an agreement with NASA to pay extra, or does that end up being, just a bonus for you guys? Thanks.
Yeah, because splashdown weather and potential undocking delays are nothing new. Benji referenced that, and of course NASA has worked through that with SpaceX on past flights. So we and NASA, Axiom and NASA, anticipated that there could be delays, and we set up the contract so that there was an equitable amount dedicated to the potential delay. So there will be no additional transfer of funds based on the extended mission.
Our next question comes from Andrea with the Houston Chronicle.
Hi. Actually, that last question was pretty much my question, so I'm just going to follow up on it. Derek, did the crew members' contracts have any clause where the amount they paid varied on the time spent on the station? Thank you.
Yeah, there was no additional costs for any parties based on the extension of the mission.
Thank you, Derek. Next, we'll go to Marcia Smith.
Thanks so much. I was curious, Benji, with more questions about the cadence of flights. So Axiom is looking at flights to the space station, but of course you do flights just to Earth orbit, and you've got some of those coming up as well. So apart from the space station, which has its own scheduling issues, how many flights do you think you could do per year of crews, even if it's just to Earth orbit? And you mentioned that, it's really when Starship starts flying that you'll have a lot of seats available. So can you give us an update on Starship? How are things going towards the first launch, and when do you think people will be able to book seats on that, apart from Jared Isaacman?
Sure. In terms of Dragon flights, I would love to see, many, right? Half a dozen crew flights a year would be great, or more. And I think that we can get to a place where we can sustain that. If there's a market for it and a need, we would definitely do that. I won't really comment on Starship right now since we're focused on Dragon and Axiom for this mission, but I know that there's lots of good sources for that too.
Our next question comes from Chelsea Gold from space.com. I'm sorry, Chelsea. It's all messed up here on our leaderboard, so my apologies.
No worries whatsoever. Chelsea Gold with space.com. I know that you've touched on this a bit, both Benji and Derek, but with Ax-1 now successfully completed, everyone's safely on the ground, how do you now feel that this mission sets a precedent within commercial space flight as the first all-private crewed mission to station, now that everything is said and done and everyone's on the ground?
Well, I would say that, there was a lot of eyes on this mission just to see if it was practical. Everybody understood it was possible. You can put 4 private citizens on a spacecraft and send them by ISS, but can you train them in an abbreviated amount of time? Can you prepare them for the mission in a way that minimizes impact on the ISS crew? Those are the questions. And I think we proved we could do that. And I think we're going to come out of this with a lot of significant lessons learned. And just Peggy Whitson, who is going to be our commander for AX2, followed the mission closely, and she was in the Axiom Control Center, and she and I had many conversations during the mission about things to do differently and things to do better for the next mission, and a lot of it had to do with training. Based on the experiences that the crew had on this mission, what are the specific things that we could focus on that will make the crew better prepared, especially for the very intense first several days where they're, still getting their space legs, where everything is new to them, but there's still a lot of significant activities they need to accomplish. So we talked a lot about training for those first several days, and then also training that they got that they don't need. We're going to go back and review the things that they learned both at Johnson Space Center relative to ISS, and to a lesser extent about the Dragon, to see if there's stuff that they don't need that we can streamline. So I would say that we proved it's possible. We proved that we can prepare the crew in a way that makes them effective and productive on orbit. And we're ready to go do it again, and we're going to do it even better next time.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Chelsea. Our next question comes from Daria from The Information.
Yes, thank you. Daria Solovyeva with The Information. I was wondering if you could share more details about what makes this particular mission different, both in terms of scope and in terms of specific partnerships, what made it possible? And also to follow up on just the earlier question in terms of the initial lessons that you were just sharing, what do you hope the impact is going to be of this mission on the private space industry in the years to come?
Sure. So the most obvious difference is that there were no government employees sponsored by national space agencies on the flight. These were all private citizens. Of course, Axiom chose to fly Michael Lopez Alegria as the commander in order to provide the experience and the leadership that we think is important to accomplish, especially this first mission. But he had also already retired from NASA, and it's been years and years since he flew to ISS. So I think what it demonstrates to the world is that there's a new avenue to get to low Earth orbit and to all the opportunities that it provides. That it's opportunities to other sovereign nations and governments that don't necessarily have a full-blown space program, but have a desire for all the benefits that a space program brings. We offer ways to fly their astronauts and do meaningful science on orbit. And then, of course, it offers opportunities for individuals like Larry, Eitan, and Mark, who have interest in research and science that's beneficial to the world at large. So I think it just it shows that there's a way to get there that wasn't necessarily there before, and I think it will cause kind of a different perspective worldwide about what's possible.
Thank you, Derek. Next question, Steve Gorman from Reuters.
Hi, thanks for doing this. So I had two quick questions. One, I take it, I want to just make sure that the training that was provided, by NASA and that was still paid for by Axiom and its customers, right? That wasn't a subsidy by NASA essentially. So that is included in the cost of what your customers pay for their seat aboard the rocket. And secondly, did any of the crew suffer any kind of seasickness? It looked like that capsule was kind of rocking and bobbing quite a bit there after a splashdown before they were able to harness it up.
Sure. Relative to the International Space Station systems and emergency training, we did pay NASA directly. We paid NASA directly for the facility time, and then we paid the primary NASA training subcontractor, KBR, for the instructor time. So that was all built into the price, and it was not a subsidy. And I don't know, Benji can speak to his experience, but the seas look pretty good today. And there was some minor rocking, but it didn't look too bad to me. And based on everything I've heard, the crew was feeling great.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather was great for splashdown. It was all within our bounds for nominal splashdown and nominal weather. And the rocking that you saw in the capsule was also within normal space and expected. And you can see how Dragon, that's one of the great designs of a capsule type system, and it rights itself pretty quickly, and the crew is doing really well.
Thanks. Next question, Ken Kramer from Space Up Close.
Hey, thank you for taking my question and doing this briefing, and congratulations on a great mission. My question for Derek, please. Curious about the future Axiom missions. I'd like to know, will they be all science focused, or would they have another focus? And do you foresee these to be about the length, 10 days you had before, or are you looking to longer term missions too? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'll address the mission duration question first. AX2 is planned also to be a 10-day mission, and AX2 is the only mission that we currently have agreement in principle with NASA on. But I will say that Axiom, in our plans, one of our goals is to provide longer opportunities on orbit for longer term research. And that would be, typically that would be a program offered to sovereign nation astronauts. But what we're talking about proposing to NASA is something like a 30-day to 60-day mission, where you would just have more time to perform lengthier and more experiments on orbit. But that's something that we've discussed unofficially with NASA, but it needs a lot more discussion before we would put that into the baseline, because of course, the capsule that the Axiom crew flies on would be on ISS that much longer, which ties up a port that NASA desperately needs for their other vehicles. So it uses more resources on ISS, of course. So there's, the longer you're there, the more resources you combine or consume, and then the longer you're on the port. So these are things we need to work out with NASA, but it's certainly our goal to do longer missions. What was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
I think we lost him. The line. Well, I thank you, Derek and Ken. If there's anything, you can email me, and I will get back to you with anything else. I will say that was our last call, our last question. So I appreciate everyone for participating in today's call. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the AX1 mission with our partners on behalf of the teams of Axiom Space, SpaceX, and NASA. We thank you for joining us for this ride. If you need more information, please visit axiomspace.com. Throughout the days, we'll provide more content, more visuals from, and pictures and video from the team, the crew that while they were aboard on the International Space Station. And if you have any follow-up questions, please email myself or media@axiomspace.com for more information. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to the entire team, and go Ax1. Have a great day all.